Hello everyone, and I'm Autobot Sonic the Telltale Gamer, bringing latest and everything Telltale games, Transformers, and more. For today's review, we are going to be looking at Transformers Cyberverse Season 2, Power to Spark, Episode 5, Trials, and I gotta say, with this episode, I guess the expression never judge a book by its cover is true, because last episode when I was giving my review of Bring Me the Spark of Optimus Prime, we saw that the whole arc with Slipstream I panned it as saying that was totally pointless and just felt stupid for no reason, but lo and behold, this episode just makes it so important to the overall main plot of Cyberverse, and we actually just get the whole main plot of this season moving forward, which I was really surprised by. I didn't expect Slipstream's plot from last episode to come back in such a big way, but yeah, this is a really good episode that after we've kind of had a little reprieve with Visitor and Bring Me the Spark of Optimus Prime, this was a nice change of pace in getting back to the main story and putting it at the center of attention. So we're going to go ahead and everything this episode did right and what it did wrong. So this episode kind of starts off in a really cool way with basically a dual narration between both Wheeljack and Soundwave, with Wheeljack talking to all the Autobots and Shockwave talking to all the Decepticons, in which essentially it's the two of them explaining to their respective factions that they've been using the ground bridges as well as the help of other Autobots, like we see Bumblebee and Windblade and Rack and Ruin for the Autobots, and then we see Soundwave, Slipstream, and Claw and Lockdown for the Decepticons, all kind of using the ground bridges to sort of triangulate the position of the Allspark after Megatron saw Cheetor at the end of the last episode with Bring Me the Spark of Optimus Prime. So eventually it ends up with both the Decepticons and Autobots discovering the location of the Allspark, and Optimus and Megatron both get their teams ready to go in. However, as they both go in, Optimus and Megatron are both able to make it through their space bridges without any trouble, but when Bumblebee and Windblade try to follow Optimus and Shadow Striker and Soundwave try to follow Megatron, neither of them are able to make it through, and so Optimus and Megatron end up being the only ones who end up actually being able to make it through. And we get this really cool interaction between Optimus and Megatron this episode that I'm surprised we honestly haven't seen them interact more throughout this whole show so far. The only other times we've got to see them interact, like, on such a personal level was back in Season 1 in the flashbacks. The ones that I can think of off the top of my head were Episode 6, Megatron is My Hero, which is sort of basically the origin story for Megatron in Cyberverse. And then Episode 10, McAdams, where we had that one brief flashback, I think, when Bumblebee first goes into McAdams and he sees Optimus and Megatron sitting at one of the booths with Optimus saying that he would write one of Megatron's speeches. And it seems like they're getting ready to fight each other over the Allspark when all of a sudden Cheetor, who's been watching them the whole time and probably just messed with the ground bridges that only they could come in, interrupts the fight and introduces himself. And I gotta say, with how Cheetor presents himself in Cyberverse, it is a far cry from how he was presented in Beast Wars, where he was essentially, again, I've only seen the first episode of Beast Wars, but from my knowledge, basically, that Cheetor in Beast Wars is essentially the smoke screen / hot rod of Beast Wars, that he's the cocky, like, hot-headed Autobot who just kind of just does whatever he wants. In Cyberverse, Cheetor kind of resembles Grimlock, actually, in this, that he's very theatrical and dramatic at times, but on I don't know, to me he has a lot more enthusiasm than Grimlock does, and that's only strengthened by his voice actor TJ Nelson, who, after looking over his IMDb, I was shocked to see that this is currently his only voice acting role, so he's either fairly new to the voice acting role or just tried it as a one-time thing. But honestly, TJ Nelson does a pretty good job of bringing a new take to Cheetor, and hopefully if he decides to continue voice acting, I'd love to see what else he could do in either the Transformers franchise or just other stuff later down the line. So after Cheetor reveals himself, he basically essentially explains to Optimus and Megatron that he is the guardian of the Allspark and that he was created to protect it, which I gotta say, I'm not exactly sure why making Cheetor of all bots the guardian of Allspark was, what was Boulder Media's decision to do that as make them the head of the protector of the Allspark, but I don't know, we'll see where it goes. I'm not, if this episode's taught me anything, it's not to judge a book by its cover, so maybe we'll see, like, there's some bigger significance to why Cheetor of all bots was chosen as the guardian of the Allspark later on down the line. Anyway, as he explains his existence to Optimus and Megatron, he explains that basically he's made sure that Optimus and Megatron were the ones who here, so they could undergo trials to decide which one of them gets the Allspark. And I gotta say, the way this goes, this was not what I was expecting. So it starts off that he has Optimus and Megatron get ready, presumably to fight. But as they're about to start fighting, Cheetor stops him again, saying that they're gonna do like a trivia game, like a trivia challenge, something like that. It's really weird, because like he starts off asking Megatron like what kind of files Optimus was in charge of back when he was a file clerk before becoming a Prime, and Megatron's reaction here is exactly how I reacted watching this. I was just so confused, of all things, having Cheetor decide the fate of the Allspark over a trivia contest, and then he goes to Optimus basically asking him who was the champion of the gladiator pits that Megatron took down back in Megatron's My Hero, and it's honestly kind of funny how like how Optimus just doesn't remember it at all, and how almost like insulted Megatron is by Optimus's lack of knowledge towards him, and honestly really gives a lot of comedy to Optimus and Megatron's relationship, where we've just kind of seen them as, we kind of saw them as friends in the beginning of Season 1 and all those flashbacks, and then more so enemies towards the end of Season 1, especially these past few episodes of Season 2. But to see like a little bit of comedy driven where they're just both they kind of bicker like an old married couple in a sense, and I kind of love that. But eventually, when they realize that the questions are just getting them nowhere, Cheetor proposes a trial by combat instead, which is really interesting as to how he does it. So he starts off with disappearing into 2 different ground bridges, getting different vehicles for Optimus and Megatron to use as battle armor, essentially. So he gets like a fighter jet for Optimus and a helicopter for Megatron, saying that they're going to use them as armor, but of course neither of them are flight type Transformers, so they can't really use it. But that's when Cheetor decides to use the Allspark to essentially force a combination with Optimus and Megatron. So Cheetor grabs the Allspark off like the little pedestal it's on and basically unleashes, kind of similar to what happened to Bumblebee back in Season 1, where he uses the Allspark to create like an energy wave into Optimus and Megatron that allows the fighter jet and helicopter to break apart and basically transform into armor that both Optimus and Megatron can use. And now, obviously, this was just made as sort of just a marketing ad so Hasbro could license, like, oh, get the new fighter jet Optimus figure, super battle charged Allspark figure, and the super turbo Megatron helicopter figure. But honestly, the way they're incorporated into this show, it makes a lot of sense, and kind of is a nice callback, actually, to the Bayverse movies, with Megatron. His helicopter form reminds me a lot of Grindor from Revenge of the Fallen, when Starscream and Megatron fought Optimus in the force battle that Megatron ends up killing Optimus in that one. His moveset, especially with the Energon Buzzsaw axe that he has, reminds me a lot of Grindor's toolset in Revenge of the Fallen. Meanwhile, Optimus's fighter jet armor reminds me a lot of not only the armor he gets from Jetfire in the finale of Revenge of the Fallen, but also the Minicon, like, supercharged armor he got back in Robots in the Sky Season 2 when he battled Starscream at the very end of that season. It's always nice to see, like, Optimus is no stranger to getting, like, flight-based super armor over the course of the Transformers franchise, and to have that trend to continue in Cyberverse is a welcome addition. So the two of them are fighting basically throughout the entire episode, while Wheeljack and Shockwave actually are back at the Ark and Nemesis, just trying to pinpoint their exact location. And the fight is pretty evenly matched between the two of them until Megatron gets the upper hand towards the end, when he's getting ready to like buzz Optimus's face off with his Buzzsaw axe. But then Optimus ends up pointing one of his arm rockets at Megatron, planning to take them both out so no one gets the Allspark. But just as he's about to fire and kill them both, Starscream, of all mechs, shows up through a ground bridge portal, looking totally pristine, I say, after the savage beating / death that Megatron gave him back in Episode 2, Bad Moon Rising. And like I said, I knew that Starscream wasn't going to stay dead, considering how he was in the opening for Season 2 as a prominent character. And I'm really interested to see how exactly Starscream ended up surviving his beatdown from Megatron in Episode 2. We may see this even in the next episode, Dark Birth, as I've seen from thumbnails, seems like Episode 6 is going to be a Starscream-focused episode. So this is basically the big twist this episode, that Starscream comes out another ground bridge, unbeknownst to Optimus, Megatron, and even Cheetor, and just easily snatches it off the pedestal. And this is like one problem I have with it, that Cheetor seems to be like this all-powerful guardian of the Allspark, and then just Starscream just swipes the Allspark from Cheetor like right under his nose, and Cheetor's powerless to do anything about it. Just kind of makes Cheetor feel a little incompetent, so to speak, and I don't know, just it feels awkward just having Cheetor take Guardian Allspark so nonchalantly, in my opinion. But anyway, just when Megatron and Optimus are about to charge at Starscream ends up using the Allspark to essentially strip Optimus and Megatron of their battle armor that Cheetor gave them earlier, and then makes his escape through the same ground bridge with the Allspark. But unbeknownst to Optimus, he thinks that Starscream is actually in cahoots with Megatron still, and that he planned for Starscream to steal the Allspark while they were too busy fighting. And Megatron just seems like super confused by it first, but eventually decides to roll with it, thinking he'll get like an upper hand on Optimus if he thinks that Starscream is still working with him. So Megatron leaves through another ground bridge before Optimus can chase after him, just leaving him alone with Cheetor. And that brings us to the side plot of this story, which is again focused on Slipstream and her Seekers. Now when I saw this, I'm like, oh, not again with Slipstream and the Seeker plot, please, Hasbro, you're killing me. But the ending is such a good payoff that it makes me regret dragging on that last episode. So it starts off with earlier this episode when Optimus and Megatron first go missing, where Soundwave essentially tells Slipstream to rally her Seekers in an effort to find Megatron. And of course we go on a big chase with Slipstream looking all over the world for their Seekers, until she ends up finding their tracking signals out in the desert where Bumblebee and Windblade first met back in Season 1, Episode 1, and only to find out that the trackers were just planted as a decoy. So Slipstream is obviously angered by this, but is still able to find where they all went through tracing their Energon trails, and it of course leads us back to the missile silo that they captured Windblade back in Season 1, and when I saw it, I'm like, oh no, not again, because the missile silo episodes of Season 1, that was like Teletran X, Matrix of Leadership, and Siloed, those were, in my opinion, the worst episodes of Cyberverse ever made. And to go back to that with the Slipstream plot, I'm like, ugh, I can't, I really don't like this. I don't want to see where this is going. I don't care, this is pointless. But then Boulder Media hits us with the twist ending where, first off, I want to apologize from an error I made back in my review of Bring Me to Spark Optimus Prime, where I said, oh, Thundercracker and Acid Storm are just carrying this orange orb around the Nemesis, and, like, I don't know what it's for, they playing some sort of game. I totally forgot that was actually Vector Sigma that they were carrying. I totally had that cross my head that was Vector Sigma that they were carrying, as Slipstream states as soon as she finds Thundercracker, Nova Storm, Acid Storm, and Thrust with Vector Sigma, and I was so confused as to like, oh, so that makes more sense, but why are they still doing Vector Sigma? And Slipstream is reasonably enraged by this, threatening to have them all executed. And when she asks like why they would do this, turns out that Starscream actually commanded all of them to do this, and it's really cool to see that despite how conniving and backstabbing Starscream is, all the Seekers still respect him more than Slipstream, probably because of all the failures Slipstream had back in Season 1 of Cyberverse, which I can understand to a degree. And so that really puts this whole Slipstream plot into a brand new perspective, that secretly Starscream's been plotting this sort of coup on the Decepticons with all the other Seekers, who clearly still value him as a leader over Slipstream, despite Megatron promoting her to the head of the Seekers. And it's really cool to see that now we know back in Bring Me to Spark Optimus Prime, that's who Thundercracker was talking to in that episode. He wasn't talking to Acid Storm, he was talking to Starscream, and he and them were bringing Vector Sigma out of the Nemesis because they were planning to bring it to Starscream. And as we remember back in Megatron's My Hero, Vector Sigma has the power to create new Transformers. So with the Allspark, maybe Starscream is planning to create his own army of Decepticons to try and take over, to kill Megatron and the rest of the Autobots, and take over the Decepticons and Earth as a whole, and then probably use the Allspark to recreate Cybertron in its own image. So now we've got three factions in this mix. We've got the Autobots led by Optimus, we've got Megatron and Decepticons with Slipstream, and by Decepticons I mean just Soundwave, Shockwave, Lockdown, Clobber, and Slipstream, and then we have the Starscream with his Seekers, and who've got the Allspark and Vector Sigma. So it's cool to see. I can totally see that Starscream's going to end up becoming probably the main villain of this season, and then Optimus and Megatron will be forced to work together to take him down. And I'm interested to see where that goes, because we've sort of seen this happen in other stuff before in the past in the Transformers franchise, but it'd be interesting to see how Cyberverse handles this and if they do it any differently. Finally, that leads us to the end of this episode, where after Starscream is revealed to have been the one contacting all of his Seekers and basically just rallying them to form a coup on Megatron, we cut back to the Autobots, where Optimus finally returns and explains to the Autobots that the Allspark was stolen by Megatron, and still thinking that Starscream is working with him, but he states that all is not lost as he's brought back Cheetor to help them locate the Allspark, which Bumblebee is enthusiastic about because now everyone believes him in the fact that he saw Cheetor, and even Grimlock seems to be getting along with Cheetor since they both have a very theatrical personas to them, which I'm interested to see how Cheetor and Grimlock interact with each other later on down the season, especially considering how they'll both be main characters throughout the season. And so, that was my review of Transformers Cyberverse Season 2, Episode 5, Trials. If I had to rate this episode, I would definitely give it a 9 out of 10. Arguably a really good episode after bringing the spark of Optimus Prime and, what was episode 3? The Visitor. Both of those episodes, they were good filler episodes, but this kind of takes back, all the bad stuff that was wrong with the Visitor and bringing the spark of Optimus Prime, and recontextualizes the Slipstream plot into something that's actually really important for the plot going forward. And because of that, I'm actually going to issue my first ever re-review to a episode, and that's going to be for Bring Me the Spark Optimus Prime. Originally, I believe I gave it an 8.75 or a 9 out of 10. I'm going to bump it up to a 9.25 out of 10, because now we know the Slipstream plot wasn't totally pointless. I really enjoyed that episode. I still think that in the context of the episode, it was a little boring, but now knowing that the plot served an overarching thread, wasn't just a one-and-done episode plot, really makes me feel like that was a better use of its time. And I'm really interested to see how Starscream's machinations will progress over the course of this season. So that's going to be it for this review. I'll be back soon with Episode 6, Dark Birth. If you like this review, be sure to like, comment, and of course subscribe, and I will see you guys later. Take it away, Bumblebee.
Bumblebee out.